In Sicily, when something is called ghiotta, it means it is greedy food, so good you cannot resist it. This humble pan of courgettes, potatoes, tomatoes, olives and capers, finished with soft cooked eggs, is one of those dishes. Honest, simple, deeply comforting. Let me show you how to make it. The word ghiotta in Sicily is used to describe a rich and savory preparation, often simmered with tomato and capers and olives. There are different variations. There are fish versions as well, and actually a very popular one is pesce spada alla ghiotta, which is a swordfish ghiotta style. But today I will be doing a vegetarian stroke vegan option, and I've got all of the ingredients in front of me. Hopefully I've covered them all. Sometimes I say I've got them all and then I add something at the end, so I'll quickly run you through them. I've got here 4 potatoes weighing 500 grams, and the beauty about this dish is that you make it using what you've got in your fridge or your cupboards. So as you can see, I've got a couple of red and a couple of white, so it doesn't really matter. 2 little onions or a medium large onion, whatever you've got available. 2 zucchine or courgette, any shape, round or the long ones, it doesn't really matter. I will be using some plum tomatoes, also you can use some cherry tomatoes. I've got 4 eggs here, and I'll explain in a little while why they're in a cup. And I will be complementing the dish with some olives and some capers, as I mentioned before. And also I've got here the basil, which is a key ingredient in these recipes, and some water, and you left the water out. This is a half a glass, about 100 milliliters. At the end I will be using some Parmigiano Reggiano, but that is Parmesan, individual taste, you can drop if you don't want it. Of course, salt, pepper, olive oil, and in my case, in Francesco's case also, I will be adding a few chili flakes at the end, but that is very optional. So I'll make a start and I'll show you exactly what to do step by step. I'm not sure if you're aware, but in Sicily, the main meal is actually consumed in lunchtime rather than in the evening, like in the UK. And this is a dish I remember from hot lunch times where dinner had to be light but filling. And my mum used to cook it with what we had available at the time, as I said to you before. But also, often she would do it without the eggs, because there were 6 of us, plus mum and dad, so 8 people. And not very often we used to always have eggs, so the version was always a vegetarian version, which actually, if it's very hot, is not a bad thing. But as I said, I will be adding eggs today. We begin with a little olive oil and a sliced onion, just enough heat to soften it up. That sweetness is very important, but make sure that you do not brown them up. I generally tend to leave the skin on my potatoes when I cook with them, but for this recipe I will be peeling them. That is because I want the potatoes to absorb as much flavour as possible, and clearly with the skin that will not be the case.
Are you ready? Shall I take it out your way?
However, it is not all lost, as Julie's here with the compost bin, and this will go to... Do they go to the worms, or what do you do with them?
Not these, actually, as it happens, no. I'm letting my worms sort of finish up doing their job on the bin at the moment, and then I'll
So when do they go to the worms?
These will just go on my normal compost heap.
Okay, so it's not all lost. We will compost it in our vegetable bin outside. These are individual choices, and you do whatever you prefer, but in my case I like to make sure that the potatoes cook all at the same time, so I'm cutting them into 4 pieces, and they will be broadly the same size. If you look, they are all very similar. So from a potato I will get effectively 4 pieces. And I start building up the base by adding them to the onions, which have been simmering nicely for a couple of minutes. Now to the zucchini or courgette, depending where you are in the world, they are the same thing. Now this is something which my mum actually has recommended to me, and I think there is an element of truth. She always said to remove the peel from one and leave the peel in another. That is because the peel from courgette can be quite bitter at times, and in this particular dish we don't want any single ingredient to take over. So just by removing the peel from one, it will balance the dish quite beautifully. Julie's gone in the garden, but she has left the compost bin, so I'll just like I did with the potato peel, they can go in the compost. Now these are personal choices and it will not make much difference to the taste, but a typical way to slice your zucchini is to cut them in half and then in half again. So again you'll get 4 pieces from each zucchini, and then just go in the middle like this, and that is pretty much it. And I'll do the same with the one which is called a peel on. So I'll chop it in half, half again and half again. And I will continue building my base. In the meantime, by the way, the temperature is medium-low, number 4 out of 9. And with the zucchini and potatoes simmering away, it's time to start building the typical and traditional ghiotta flavour. So I've got 300 grams of plum tomatoes, so I'm nicking 2/3, so approximately a couple of 100 grams. But as I mentioned, you can also use cherry tomatoes or any fresh tomatoes. What is important though is that you cut them in half, so that they will leave lovely juice, and that will build up the flavour that we want in the ghiotta. And in I go with the rest, and every time I add an ingredient, I'll give my full list of ingredients here a good mix, so that they start blending together. I'll give everything a good couple of minutes, and then I will be adding some capers, my olives, and also some basil. Capers are often kept in salty water, so this is a good tablespoon which I've rinsed in fresh water. In terms of olives, use whatever you've got. I've got here black olives which are pitted at the moment, and also some green olives which I've got a little pip inside. I keep mine in olive oil, but it doesn't matter. Anything will do. As I say, this is a dish which uses anything that you've got in your cupboard. In terms of quantities, about 120-130 grams, and a good handful of basil. And very simply, capers go in, followed by the olives and any residual oil in there. I'll break in my fresh basil, and I'll pour in my water, as I mentioned before, about half a glass, 100 milliliters. A little pinch of salt, followed by some pepper. By the way, reference water, try not to add more than half a glass unless you've got some very high and it evaporates. You want to gently simmer the vegetables, you don't want to boil them. The gentle simmer is what extracts most of the flavour from your vegetables, making such a comforting meal. So I'll turn the heat up so that the water reaches temperature, but I'll turn it down onto medium-low now, and I'll give everything a good mix, and I'll place the lid on. For the next 20 minutes I will not touch it, so that the water will reduce in volume and the vegetables will infuse with a lovely flavour. In the meantime, while I wait, I'll explain why I've got an espresso mug for each egg. It's very simple really, 2 reasons. Number 1, because I want to make sure that they do not break when they go in the pan later, and then I end up with a broken egg. Number 2 is because also I will be not messing about, and they will all cook at the same time. So this is a good preparation as far as I'm concerned. And as I'm not the best at opening eggs, this gives me a very good preparation. And there you go, look, they're all perfectly ready. And of course, you've guessed it, compost bin. There are of course alternative vegetables that you can use, not necessarily you have to stick to the ones I'm using today, but I would strongly recommend that you leave the potatoes in. So you could replace, for example, the zucchini with eggplants. Also you can use the heart of the artichoke, or green or red bell peppers, or something else you can use is also green beans. What I'll do, I will give you a list of alternative vegetables that you can use for this recipe in the description, but also I'll give you a list of what to avoid, like for example cabbage or broccoli or cauliflower. They've got too much sulfurous in terms of taste, and they could be overtaking the complete taste of the recipe. So again, they will also be listed in the notes of this video. And I will be very honest with you, as I've never cooked it before, but if you would like me to try and make a ghiotta di pesce, which is a fish-based ghiotta, let me know in the comments and I'll give it a shot. But I'm being very honest, I've never made it before. Let me know what sort of fish you would like me to try with, and I'll give it a shot. But, again, another but, we will be learning that one together, of course. So 20 minutes have passed, and the first thing I want to check is to ensure that my potatoes are almost cooked. And very simply, I'll go in with a fork and I'll check them. See, I did cut mine quite big, so they are not quite ready yet. So I think I'm going to be putting the lid back on and leave them for another 5 minutes, and then we can go back to them. Of course, if you chop your potatoes smaller, the likelihood is that within 20 minutes they would have been cooked. But I like mine chunkier, so I'll wait 25 minutes before I add the eggs. I think that the real magic in this dish comes from the flavour that the capers and the olive release. It's absolutely beautiful, especially if you cook them from the beginning. So, potatoes are nearly done, so it's a good time for me to add the eggs. So this is a little bit of a strategic move. Just make a little well somewhere and then go along with your little cup, and unless you feel brave, you can just break it in immediately from the egg shell, but I don't. So I will position my eggs in a square. So that's number one, that's number two. And as I mentioned earlier, as they're all ready, they will all cook together without panicking that I might break one. I'll put a little pepper now, but I will also be putting a little pepper later. And before I cover the whole thing up, I'll add a little bit more basil so that it releases more flavour. And the lid goes back on. And just like if you were doing poached eggs, really no difference. So about 4 or 5 minutes, depending on how well you want your eggs to be done. But 4 to 5 minutes should give you the white be nice and firm, and the yolk should be just good enough for you to eat it. So I'll see you in 5 minutes. And here it is, we are ready. So let's take a look. You can see that the eggs are cooked beautifully. At this point I also like to add a little more olive oil. Obviously this is raw, so it will add tremendous flavour. And I mentioned that I was going to add a little bit more pepper. I do this because when you cook pepper, I think it loses some of its strength. So I'm just making sure that there is enough, especially on top of the eggs. You can serve this hot, or you can serve it warm. It's hearty and light, and it'll keep very, very well. In my case, I will have it later with Julie. We will have ours warm. But I mentioned Parmesan cheese earlier, so I will be grating some Parmesan cheese. Of course, if you're vegan, just drop the cheese and drop the eggs, and it's also very delicious. But I will try some before I go, and I will let you know what it's like. I will pinch here a little courgette here. Delicious, a true Sicilian Ghiotta. Vegetable, patience, and nothing wasted. It's delicious. If you make your own version, if you've done it before, you made it before, let me know in the comments. I'd be interested to see if you've made it, and if you've made it, what you've made. Well, that's the lot for today. Thank you for watching. Buon appetito, and hopefully you make it. I think you should. It's lovely. Ciao, ciao.